John McNutt, Mo Russell, and Mo will give you a little more background about himself when he gets up here in a few minutes. We're just going to take a little bit of time and run through some cost reduction stuff. Now, this is about the swine one, which I'm doing tomorrow. We've done now for 16 years. The crop side, I think, started for the LattaHarris group about 10 years ago. So this just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of background about what we're looking at. So we've had clients over the years and people we've worked with that we have helped them understand their cost production. And we started to realize that it was also helpful. It's really helpful to get your cost production and your numbers farm to farm, comparing against yourself in prior years. But then we also thought it also helps to give us some context by comparing to others. Now, the data, the LattaHarris data, is from 2018. Unfortunately, by now it's got some age on it, 8 months of age on it. The one thing that I'm going to maybe just spend a little more time on is talk a little bit about the process and about the organization of the data and why we organize it in a certain way and why that supports benchmarking. And this is not a scientific process where a university-controlled study. This is a series that I call them observations. And they're laid out in a format, in a standardized format that hopefully supports comparisons. And so I'm going to start off with what this is not. This is, I always tell people, I want you, people ask me, well, my numbers would improve if you realize that there's this deal or that deal. I said, what are your numbers? What's reality? Because this is not, nobody knows what your results are here except yourself. And so there's no bragging rights, there's no contest involved. And this has really helped me over the years understand my appreciation of what managerial accounting is all about, which is you have to have an accrual income statement. But you have to have only one divisor. And the examples we're looking at here is bushels of corn or bushels of soybeans. We can do acres of the farm, but if you want to get the bushels, you got to break it down to corn or soybeans. If we have wheat data, we have to have bushels of wheat. And we're looking at the cost. So if you think about your income statement, the way I try to help drive myself to is if I have a complex farm, with most of you are anymore, with multiple enterprises, you functionally think of each enterprise that you're trying to analyze as a separate income statement for that individual enterprise. So you have to do the accrual adjustments to get you to a meaningful number for each one of those income statements. Often, and you'll see here as we look at the data too, this is not perfect, especially when you get to dealing with overheads, because there's some judgment calls. You're doing some allocations, labor, for example, especially if you have multiple enterprises, you have hog enterprise, cow feeding, cow herd, you got to do some allocation of where the labor's going. So all that's built into this data set. So I always, in my own mind, and I remember I work with a whole bunch of accountants. And accountants are wonderful people, but they do kind of like things to tie out. So sometimes they struggle a little bit with some of my allocation and some of my estimations that go on. But you kind of need it. So if you're an accountant thinking about doing this, you got to prepare yourself for less than perfect. But my goal is, if I have labor expense, and I have 3 enterprises, I have cow herd and corn and soybeans, my total labor dollars is equal to my labor for the entire enterprise. So my allocations have to add up to equal to the total. and that total ties to the total income statement. So you've got to pull all the parts. So as we do this, we try pretty hard to make sure that happens. So the other aspect of benchmarking, and when I've worked with the Russell group here, and Bo's going to talk a little bit about some of their stuff, well, I've also laid out the data in the same kind of format. I try to, and I really learned this in the swine data, is it's really helpful to put like items together. For an example, on crop inputs, it's total seed, total fertilizer, total chemical, and then there's kind of an adjustment column. In some cases, you'd say you've got, in many cases I throw in crop consulting and what I call total input costs, because those can be some trade-off. You can buy stacked genetics and spend more money on seed, that you don't have to spend as much money on chemicals. You can buy non-GMO without stack, but you have to use additional chemicals or whatever because of the seed. So if you're trying to compare yourself year to year, and particularly if you're trying to compare across operations, it's really critical to realize that one farmer takes a stacked genetics plan and his seed may be $110 an acre, and somebody else is raising non-GMO corn and his seed is $80 an acre. How do you compare them? So where you compare them is what's their total input costs. Now, the one thing that you also have to be careful of, and this gets really tricky, is I'm lucky to deal with some operations that go to special targeted markets. In some cases, you're wrapping up costs that are higher because that's what you have to do to get to that market. Say you're doing organic or something like that. So it falls apart when you're comparing, say, an organic farm input cost to a non-organic farm input cost. But still, if you break it into input costs versus just total costs, you really can start to understand where those differences exist. The other one that I work with quite a bit is I combine labor, fuel, machinery cost, including machinery interest, to come, and I do an adjustment for custom work income. If somebody's running their sprayer over their acres and then running over the neighbor's farm and they're getting reimbursed, so that's a credit against what I call operations costs. So again, any particular individual area, their labor costs may be $1, but they may have more labor, but their equipment's older, so they have to run smaller equipment running over more acres with more manpower. But at the end of the day, the operations cost is the number that I find most comparable. So I started off, the seed numbers are important, but the input cost, total input cost is a better comparative number. And then going across, the total operations cost is a better comparative number. I separate land out as a separate number, and so that's land rent, that is property taxes on that land, that's soil and water conservation on those farms, and if they are in traditional farm programs and they're getting checks based on that land from the U.S. government, I give that as a credit, a cost reducer. So trying to get numbers between operations comparable. And then I do run into, and I do a total before storage G&A and crop insurance, because I have found that those are all over the board. So I try to get a comparative, so the most comparative number is, in my mind, is before we look at that, because some people sell their corn straight out of the field and there's somebody else is paying the drying costs, so it's just not that, it's not as comparable. So that's why those are broken down. And that's all this screen does, is kind of describe that. And I think, and I pointed out too that sometimes I don't show every piece of data here, so some things may not sum if you try to sum them across, because I hide some columns because I can't get everything on the screen and make it readable. So this is the corn cost of production, and the reason you have a printout in front of you is because, as opposed to some people, I don't expect you to be able to read the data.
I can read that just fine.
You were here this morning. So I tried to put a number of things on this report. So there's a farm code, and there's a few operations here that are included in those code numbers. So I tried to share those with the folks. I have the blue is the average of these observations. That's all it is, the average of the observations. The Iowa State Cyclone Gold there is what they report. The purple, University of Illinois, is what they report. And this is taken off the internet. The larger than, less than, I tried pretty hard in this process not to identify individual operations. So there are more than 1,200 acres of corn or less than 1,200 acres, which is kind of still a lot, right? So in this data set is quite large operations and sometimes not so much.
Why 1,200 acres is the break? Just curious.
It's because it's kind of
just of the
purely arbitrary. Okay. So there you see the seed costs. So what I find interesting and what we have learned to do is to consult on this. So we sit down with a customer and we help them calculate their costs. Because, and this is, we have some other accountants in the room, I use it to we train our consultants to get an understanding, what kind of numbers do you see? What kind of numbers should you expect to see? And we use this for the same reason. And so if we're sitting down with a client and their seed cost is $130 an acre, like one of them is in here, we're going to want to ask some questions. Why is that? Why are you on the high end of that range? And sometimes, and it happens less than it used to, we might find out they don't know why. They're not doing an aggressive enough job of buying sometimes. Especially, we did this initially on the pork side, and these kind of things, discrepancies would show up in feed, for example. Their total feed cost was quite a bit higher than their contemporaries in the comparison. So then you'd say, why are you high? And if they couldn't answer that, it prompts more discussion. And we have seen drastic changes because they were not getting competitive prices. They thought they were, but they were buying from the same place every year, over and over again. And maybe they were competitive prices at one point, but this still has a tendency to drift. And so that's one of the reasons to lay it out. I'm not trying to say here, but I do know that in 2018, about $107 was the average of these observations. And these are from Corn Belt, Iowa, Illinois, surrounding states to some degree, some Missouri data in here, some Nebraska data in here. Again, not super scientific, but again, getting a sense of where we're at. Fertilizer costs, chemical costs. So to me, that becomes the value of benchmarks. It's not to say, okay, this year I was in the top 10% of these observations. It's, I understand what my costs are. I have some frame of reference. And if I'm out of kind of what looks like a normal range, either high or low, I need to ask myself some questions. And often asking those questions stimulates improvement in the operation. And if you're looking at land costs, now you'll see one of those is $71. And they've got the high as $329, which is a huge range. But a 71 is a smaller operation, and most of their land is paid for. And so I've had people tell me, well, you can't benchmark crop data because, well, you compare me to somebody who's got his land all paid for. I say, fine, take his land number out and plug in any number you want. Plug in your number and see what his net costs are.
So, are you taking the principal and the interest payments?
I am not taking the principal payments. I am taking the interest payments on land. So land, I forgot to mention that. So land includes land debt.
Okay. And then on equipment, you're just taking it.
I'm taking interest. So interest is an interesting one. I try to assign, and this is where FDS is doing a good job in the initial setup of how you post your data to try to get it to managerial with more information is you try to make a ledger account, not a ledger account for interest, it's a ledger account for land debt, a ledger account for equipment debt, and then just a general operations debt. And that's as far as I go. But then also another part of benchmarking is being somewhat consistent year to year, that if you treated this expense last year in this category, you kind of keep it in the same category. But you've got to have a robust enough database that you have that information. Now, I often come back into conversation to say, you look at the vendor, John Deere, it's probably equipment debt, but anymore you can't even trust that because there's so much vendor financing going on now. It's really hard to know sometimes. Bayer comes in and gives $1 million for a year, and you don't have to pay the interest until next December. So without a accrual, it's really hard to manage all that's going on. And on like interest, we do the best data sets we're adjusting for accrual changes in interest. The other kinds of things that you spot is, so if your land costs are really high, and this is a really good reason, it starts at 329, I'm going to say, what's that? Now, what have I seen in the last couple of years? First couple of years, land didn't change much after things started, after the prices dropped. I started to see this last year, land is coming down, land costs. Probably because it has to, or they're not going to be in business anymore. So Mo can confirm that with his observations. For a long time, I didn't see much movement in seed, but I've started to see some movement in seed costs being reduced. It's still not as much as one would think under the price pressure. Fertilizer is tough because everybody's got a justification for why they're fertilizing a certain way. But it also, because of my experience on the swine side, when I've looked at problems in swine costs, it's almost never because they weren't feeding pigs growing. They were feeding them better than they needed. And they feeding them a higher cost diet. Yeah, they might have got good performance, but they couldn't get margin because the costs were too high. I suspect, this is me talking, Mo, please confirm this, but I suspect sometimes, everybody's going for that 300 bushel home run yield, and they think, well, if I don't fertilize it, I can't get it. And so, but pig guys have been much more responsive than the crop guys to say, and you'll see here shortly when we start looking at projected margins, okay, why are you projecting this kind of off? That's what you're projecting. Why are you doing that? It might all work, So I don't know what you do with that. Fuel. The fuel came in at $20. That's kind of my standard. When I look at somebody's database and their fuel is 8 or their fuel is 38, I'd say, wait a second. That's not right. We're missing something. We're either missing something on the low end, or we got something in there. We got LP in there for drying, and it's in the fuel for operation. So, again, I'm kind of talking about how you utilize the data. And the moping again, so the guys that I want to be banking with, I want to be their banker for, is the ones that really have good machine numbers. And, Cropzilla, works at, I applaud you because it really feels to me, in many cases on crop production, that management of that equipment line is a big separator between operations. And there's a lot of people I've worked with over the years that we have done this with that absolutely hate doing custom work for people. They never get paid what they should. And they usually don't get paid what they should. But what that impact of that extra revenue from running over the equipment or labor more than they need to get their own stuff done, the impact of that extra revenue on the overall cost is so positive that when we've done this and we've seen that, they kind of start to decide, okay, well, I'm going to try to work my custom work rates up higher, but I'm not going to give it away. I've seen people who said, I'm so tired of messing with this, I just want to forget it. Well, it can cost the bottom line quite a bit. We have some thoughts on that too. But that's, to me, still right now in these tough times, one of the best places I see is for full utilization. Now this year, of course, is a classic year. You had all the equipment in the world, you're still going to get over the ground. So, but and I did notice that also too here is that I have some clients that I've worked with, and I went through and we looked at their cost numbers, and their equipment costs were higher. Actually, the net came out higher than they had expected. And so we started to look and went through the numbers, and we kind of said, well, what happened to your equipment? I said, why is our depreciation so much higher than it was last year? Well, I spent $350,000, $400,000 on new combine and new sprayers. And you're trying to you got to depreciate that through, and that really raises the cost. Now, the other side of it is they got most of their crop done in by late April, which this year was huge. So, it's not one size fit all analysis, but it does give you things to think about. And so when I start off the conversation too, I said if you got a net income for a farming operation, you want to do it, you have to have accrual, but then you also have to have enterprises. Because if you look at your corn cost, you got to drive your corn cost column to what it costs to raise that corn. Because what are you selling? You're selling a bushel of corn. So your divisor has to be owned in bushels of corn. And sometimes it gets cost accounting and enterprise accounting can get tricky, and you do have to judgment calls about. For an example, I had swine operations that are quite large that have a little bit of crop, and their labor takes care of pigs and then goes out and drives tractor and whatever, and they do their crop. So what do we do with all of their crop inputs? We just call it feed. Because that's what they're raising. They're raising corn to go into the pigs, and they're using the labor. Instead of trying to split it all up, we just add to their cost and call that, we call that cost of putting that crop in. So you can't have multiple dividers. It just doesn't work. You've got an expert sitting up here in the front row. But I don't find that it works. You got to get down to one divisor. So in here we've got average yields, and we're 224 average out of this group, so that's pretty darn good. You see them kind of all over the board, and I'm sure 19's cost production is going to be way all over the board, and nobody really knows what to think at this point. Machinery costs, let's go back and look there. You see the range of, so machinery costs is depreciation, book depreciation. Okay, you've got to calculate full depreciation. And it's got to be on that line of equipment that's being utilized or in the shed, available to be utilized, whether it gets used that year or not, but if you're paying for it, it's interest, it's repairs, it's leases, and I don't know things, but I saw an awful lot of costs get really high because the leases were that high. But you include all that, and that's all included in that number. So in my mind, that allows me to compare between farms, even though they have a different strategy. So that to me, and that's why I made my comments a little while ago, why understanding machinery cost is so critical. And to me, it's still the biggest black hole in farm cost analysis. And so much machinery gets bought because somebody sits down with their tax accountant and they say, well, I can't pay that kind of tax, and in their tax planning, and so they think, well, I'm saving tax if I trade this year. So so the tax accountants they're not responsible, they're not forcing, they're being asked, how do we keep our tax bill down? And the farms are going, let's spend some money on equipment. And so equipment is one area, and frankly, many times we're got into some kind of crisis issue, or there's something that's just not working. You start to break it out and dig it down and stuff like that, you can see they're way over-equipped. Sometimes you see labor is way over because they got way too many family members eating at the same time. And, since the idea is you got to fill in income, and you've got an income statement, and that's your labor bill, and that's your guaranteed payments, and all that's in there. If something's got to pay the bill, some enterprise has to cover those costs. So if you go clear over to the far right, 363 was an average number that I grabbed that seemed like was reasonable in our area, and I just put 363 times the yield, clear over here, and I came up with estimated net margin per acre. And I was a little bit surprised at University of Illinois, even at 363 now, they probably have a higher number, but,
What means G&A again?
Excuse me, G&A means general administrative. It's a catch-all for accounting, dues and subscription, all those things. I actually look at that in many cases to see, you're not spending enough. You can't possibly be controlling this business with as little effort as you're spending software. So, that's how it is. Not giving enough money. Now, your costs, that's an interesting one. I don't know where I would put service costs, but probably not in G&A. I'd put it into input cost management. But it probably gets caught in professional fees. The industry probably constantly changes. But that's one of the key things as we try to teach our young accountants or new people coming on board, you better understand some of the function patterns.
So, am I reading this right, that the spread per acre profit is a $400 spread across your sample percentage?
It's shocking, isn't it?
So $400 spread. And what's that spread? If you were to look at 15, 16, 17?
It's all the same.
It's a consistency. Okay. All right.
If you look, because of my age and how long I've been around, I went through the consolidation of the pork industry. And in the consolidation of the pork industry, some of the early adopters, Swine Graphics and a few others, started to look at the swine data that was out there, the North Carolinians started to look at that, and they started to see the opportunities that these guys, the Iowa guys, were so out of whack on their costs. Once they started to look at that, and that's, to me, prompted consolidation. That was a growth consolidation. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I kind of feel like the cash grain is poised for consolidation. And oftentimes when I consult with somebody that's got good numbers, I say, what's your, especially if they got good numbers and they've got a next gen or they're younger, what's your strategy to grow? Because the opportunity is going to exist, and you better go into that strategy to grow on that versus, oh, it just showed up, somebody wants it, whatever, 300 acres, and I'll take it on. Put it into context, because I think we're poised for it. And I guess it's not rocket science.
And if you were to look at the targets below average, unless I'm reading this wrong, the farms larger than 1,200 acres are the lower performers on aggregate.
It's the only thing I've learned about looking at this data, in size. You know, it really isn't size in many cases. Some of the best numbers on here are often in some of the smallest operations. And actually, the way to get the best number is not to do a very large operation and hire somebody else to do all the work. Because you can often get your neighbor to do the work cheaper than you could do, especially if you're a small operation, cheaper than you could yourself. But my guess is even if you're a sizable operation, say on hogs, and you've got 1,000 acres, you might be better off getting somebody else to farm that 1,000 acres and doing it yourself. I mean, those are the kinds of numbers we see.
Because what's not stated there is your net income for operations. This is just cost of production. So you might have a low cost of production, but you can't afford to work it because there's not enough free cash.
Certainly can happen. So on one page is the corn. So you're hearing a lot of editorial from John up here, but, you know, a lot of other seed. And you can see the soybean side. Now, because I talked to you a little bit about overheads, land is, for example, is overhead. I don't go in and say, oh, the soybean land cost is bigger than the land cost. I actually say the land cost per acre, since they can substitute corn and beans for each other, even though they probably don't because they're in some kind of pattern, is it could all be substituted. So I just say total land cost divided by total crop acres, and that's my land cost per acre. It's the same for corn and same for soybeans. There's a culprit in here that I won't mention, but you know, you double crop, that gets to be even more fun when you start doing double crop. But there are ways to kind of work around it. And they're partially, what I really have learned is you've really got a new enterprise. You've got wheat and beans. Double cropping. So it's not two crops in 1 year. It's a longer cycle. And so you have to kind of work on that to try to make sense of it. But for an example, I don't put double crop soybeans against soybeans. If I had enough double crop soybeans, I'd put them in their own category. I try to compare them because you're really looking at different animals. So the same philosophy is here. The same kind of spread. You're going to close to 400 is there. And the nice thing, and that's why I think it's really so important to work with ag accountants, get involved. Because the ag accountant, you know, if I saw somebody here and I knew was making a ton of money and they had a really bad number, you would say, well, that can't be right. So often, you know the history, you know the trends of that operation, and you know if you're seeing lots of red, and you don't expect to see red, you keep looking and keep asking questions. So that's why it's really nice to work with an ag accountant or somebody that has works with the data. So Mo, we're thinking about
John, what's limiting you from adding, doubling, tripling more of the observations here to our participants? Is it getting the information? Is it processing it? You reached quite dimension returns right now.
So we do a lot of this We don't, if we're doing the cost numbers as part of the analysis, we don't charge anything to add them to the comparison. We don't charge extra for that. So that's part of it. Part of it is getting good data sets. It's just not that much good data out there. Part of it is people don't keep their accrual records at an enterprise level. I really have to be careful if I get accountants that maybe are producing full financial statements, but if they don't produce full financial statements at an enterprise level, and they throw prepaid chemicals, the only way to figure out how to allocate that is to drive back to the original, to brute force is what I call it, to go back into the original transactions and find out what was corn and what was beans. And otherwise, all I can do is this is your cost per acre, which is helpful. In fact, Mo uses that, and he does it. Mo comes at it from a slightly different reason because he comes at it from revenue per acre standpoint. But it really can't. I find I can't benchmark like I do on a comparative basis with non-enterprise. So either I don't have a pool, or it's not enterprise level.
So FBS users or management accounting have really good tied out records. I don't know how many of them participating in this, but if they did it, and certainly it's a value to them to do that. Could you see that growing? If they get you good information, you get paid to do this, and
it should be much larger than it is.
Yeah.
I've actually had this data show up at the Federal Reserve. I don't know why, but it's shown at the Federal Reserve. The university data, the way I was thinking does a lot of it, it's starting self-reporting. People call in and say, these are what the numbers are. There's no tie-up, there's no reconciling going on. So, what do you guys see? You see a lot of, we could all use a lot better data.
No, see, that's enough.
It just, when Pat, your job, you guys, your results would be more meaningful if you could link it to that.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in some cases is uniformity of description. Right? Like I applied something. What did you apply? Because I do think you get into really. We've had experiences where you try to compare and contrast. If you let every operator define their own schematic for how they want to collect data, it's really hard.
What makes this work is I'm sitting in.
Yeah, you're the control.
I'm the controller. I'm the controller of the data. I'm looking at the data, and if something doesn't make right, if something looks wrong to me, I drill down and look at the vendors and look at the time of year. I say, okay, is this chemical expense? Well, it's in November 30th, and it's for seed. It's probably, and especially if they had another seed bill in there early in the year, I kind of figure out which one's rich. But, so it's got to be enterprise by crop per year. True or cool. And it is still a struggle. So the FBS curve is cash. Month, not once a year, maybe tie it out. So it's tying it out monthly. And the next step is tying out the inventories and making sure the inventories make sense. The next step is tying out the accruals, making sure the prepaids are in the right. You got the expense to the right, assigned to the right period. All those things fail. And once you fail too much, you can't count on the results. So my goal with NASA is that to make this easier. But I think, Pat, you're absolutely right. We got to drive, and I think you guys have addressed it with this drive to the chemical number, whatever the chemical ID number, the federal number. We got to drive to some consistent, because you can't have somebody calling it this and somebody calling it that, or you probably can, but you better get it in the soybean bucket for 18 instead of the soybean bucket for 19.
Well, I was just saying to Chris, we've had some really astute operators who actually want to understand how, their soybean is a nitrogen fixer crop and their corn on soy rotation, so how do they properly allocate that fixation to the following crop year? Just like they get into some really interesting agronomic accounting, I guess you would call it.
So I've listened to Deere talk about not managing by the farm or managing by the acre, but managing by the plant. To me, and if we can do an income statement by the plant, that'd be kind of an interesting number. And that would start to answer those questions. And that conceptually is doable.
Oh, especially when all this data starts to flow in a continuous way that's trusted. Then
That we can handle the data and get it out of the field into the machines, and we can have intelligence,
Where you can zoom
artificial
in,
intelligence,
zoom out.
sort and organize it, that would be, at least on the input side. And I don't know that getting beyond that would be terribly important, but at least you knew what the inputs were, by seed, by plant. Especially comparing across.
John, how would you handle between corn and soybeans, like the cost of equipment? Is that,
That's another one, just like land.
so it's equal,
I don't know enough to assign.
but it's equal to how?
So that would be, so Brian back here with Cropzilla, that would be, it's going to take a marriage of something like Cropzilla and a service to really be able to get those numbers, and then you got to kind of be sure, because in many cases you guys have to align the equipment, because you might need this tool this year, but you may not use it depending on the season. And you get into, different crops, and so it gets, but right now, I told you, it's not perfect, 90% rule, I got confidence I'm 90% mostly correct. And you get down to the point where, and I don't do this on the crop side, but on the pig side, I put kind of a confidence interval to try to say, I can't say with definitive that there's a difference between this number and that number, but within this range, or outside this range, there probably is. So my pig data is much tighter than the crop data. So, and I don't see enough crop data. And good, and most of the, we got lots of good pig data that comes in, and the really good crop data is short. So I'm going to move it to, so this is in, pointer.
Okay. Yeah. The last page in the report you have is our data from our clients, selected clients that we have confidence in. And it's not actual 2018 data, it's 2019 projected data. We see the same variance, top to bottom, $327. I'm going to talk more about it in the next slide. Norm, are my benchmarking slides loaded?
There's two slides. Ready to switch over?
Okay, no. If they're loaded, I'll get to them. And I'm going to talk on the next slide about machinery and labor, because we see that is where the biggest variance is. And when you stop and think about it, what the crop producer pays for seed is probably pretty close to what his neighbor is. But labor and machinery variance is just awesome. And just look at this, on projected labor, a low of 8, a high of 116. Equipment, a low of 43, a high of 216.
So Norm, you may need to come to it.
I think it's on the end of this presentation.
That's it, right there?
Yeah.
Your touchpad doesn't like me. Is that it?
Yeah, well, back one.
Or just back it up?
Okay, got it.
Oh, let me see.
What's operations?
What's operations? Which column is it? Oh,
right up the machinery.
Yeah. Operations is what's not included in inputs, land, equipment, interest. It could be,
So I put fuel, the Russell Consultants provide me their numbers, and I put it in the same format as LattaHarris's number. So operations is labor, fuel, and machinery.
And it's just the sum of the three preceding columns.
It's just the sum, it's just the sum.
this is data of the last 5 years, and I'd like to give you the definition because it's really important in determining the trend. Machinery cost, first of all, this is managerial time. And there's always an explanation. One thing I've found is an oil well or a gas well will cover up a lot of sins in cost of production. But here's how our machinery cost per acre this year, and it's preliminary, is $130 an acre. And that's the average. My father once told me, Mo, you can drown in a river that averages a foot deep. So keep that in mind. The variation on machinery cost per acre ranges from 43 to 295. So average is what it is. How do we calculate that? We take the market value of equipment used in crop production. So if there's a 100-cow stock cow herd, we take out the hay bind and the manure spreader and the grinder mixer. We use market value of equipment used in crop production. And for the power units, you got to take a percentage, and we won't go that far. But then we take that market value of that equipment and we multiply it by 25%. That 25% includes 10% depreciation, 10% interest or opportunity cost. Even if the line of equipment is paid for, there's an opportunity cost there, and 5% repairs.
For what?
5% repairs. Now, if the line of equipment's old, the repairs will be more, but the depreciation is less. Depreciation, we're constantly studying that, and we may need to modify the 10%. Because depreciation, by definition, is the allocation of funds to replace equipment worn out in the production process. So it's not what you paid for that 80-10 Case IH combine, it's what it costs you to replace it when it's worn out. And what we're finding is 10 may not be enough. Particularly with combines, planters, and sprayers. On the other hand, power units is probably less than 10. So our 10 is still in the ballpark, but we think it's on the low side. Labor cost per acre, the formula is hired labor plus operator draw divided by harvested acres. So if it's a double crop, wheat and soybeans, we add the acres twice because you're running over twice. That, and the variance is huge. It's from 0 to 116, or 8 to 116 projected. The 8, the operator's spouse is a pharmacist at Walmart. Explains that number. So as John very appropriately said, you can't just look at a number and say, well, this is good or bad. You got to look behind it and say, why is it? But then what's important in our benchmarking is we combine the two. Because you can do it with more equipment, less labor, more labor, less equipment, but at the end of the day, it's a combination of the two that hits your bottom line. And this trend has gone up significantly in the last 10 years. Not so much the last 5, but 10 years ago, in 2010, the equipment cost per acre was 62.
How much?
62. That was before precision farming. And I'll take this number with the technology we have today because it's more profitable. I'm here to tell you. So you can't just look at a number and say, well, it's good or bad. You got to say, why is it? But I think our customers have done a commendable job of controlling two things. One is equipment cost per acre, and two is labor cost per acre in the last 5 years. Particularly with what we see in costs because of healthcare and education. It's phenomenal what those two costs have done in the last 10 years. So the American farmer has really done a good job of managing those costs, in my opinion. The profitability, we've been through 5 real tough years in the commodity business. Those of you in that business, you know that. And I think it could change. But I'm surprised and very pleased that they're still positive. 2016 was close. But what happened was a lot of the inventory put on those bushels in 2014 and 15 was higher, and they didn't get marketed at that. And so I think that explained. Plus, the last 4 years have just been remarkable production yields, and that's really helped profits. Save the bacon. Save the bacon. Yeah.
And this is what yields the 19 data is what you thought they were last spring. Right? Have they adjusted down for the year? Or have they adjusted it?
The 2019 column is 2018 data.
Oh, this is actual.
Yeah, this is actually.
You're projecting.
Yeah. I just don't think we're going to have 5 years in a row of record yields. Way above trend. So this data next year will be pretty interesting. The University of Illinois Farm Business, or University of Nebraska Farm Business Association says their average family living costs in their database is $95,000 to $100,000 per year.
What's in here? What have you got?
It's probably about that. The average, well, divided about, our average operation's about 2,600 acres, so.
4,600?
2,600. At $50 an acre, yeah, you're probably above that. Other questions? Yes?
You know, I got a comment.
Yeah.
And just for what's worth it, I don't know what to think of this in terms of I analyzed on my farm this year, if I had doubled my equipment cost, I would have come out about $500,000 better off in terms of my net farm profit.
You probably took into account timeliness.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, that's the point. This year, I've never had preventive planning before, and this year we had 45% of our acres being planted.
Yeah.
If I had double the capacity to plant, look at that preventive planning payment versus having gotten planted, right?
Yeah. That's why in the
Which the larger point is, okay, this is like the extreme of it. I hope it's the extreme.
Yeah.
But being under-equipped is far, far more costly in revenue
Right.
than...
That's what, in the 20 years I've done this, I have never criticized anybody's equipment cost. And the reason is, I tell our clients, you can't manage what you can't see. So the most important thing is knowing what your figure is. Then, doing the analysis. For example, my original partner, Terry Jones, he and his brother farm 8,000 acres. And he told me 20 years ago, he said, Mo, I know we're one 24-row planter along. But that's the way I want to farm. And I tell you what, they had 85% of their acres planted in April. You can't put a price on that. So it's a starting point, first of all. And secondly, understand that variability is huge. Where Bernard and Albert Peterson farm, they have 42 days on average working days for harvest. In North Dakota, you have 14. How do you take that into account? You got to take this figure and then say, okay, what's unique about my operation? How's that align with my financial condition and objectives and how I want to farm? I've got customers that say, I know my equipment cost per acre is high, but that's the way I want to farm, and I can afford it. And I'm going to go ahead and do it. I said, fine. That's what it's for. Any other comments or reactions? Yes?
So the clients that you have here are all from what geography?
We have from North Dakota to Kentucky, from western Nebraska to upstate New York.
And the bulk of them are?
The three big eyes.
Yeah, and that's the vast majority of your data set.
Yes.
So does that weigh heavily on the totals?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because in Des Moines, Iowa, where I live, we have about 29 working days for harvest. And that, I just shared Kentucky and North Dakota with you, so it really makes a difference. You've got it. And most of this data is corn belt, corn and soybeans. It's not a lot of wheat or canola and things like that. But, I'll say it again, you can't manage what you can't see. So knowing what the number is your starting point. And then you can do good managerial accounting. Other questions or reactions?
Well, you just told us, Mo, you even wrote it at the top. Or did I write it at the top? Well, I wrote Mo's benchmark data.
Yeah.
And that's the important benchmark.
Yeah.
The other stuff's too late. It's already
Right.
kind of interesting sometimes, but this is the important one.
Plus, what just amazes me, John's already mentioned it, is the variability of the data. And the outliers on the bottom side, in most cases, don't know what their data is. Or if they have it, they don't analyze it and look at it. And you'd think in the last 20 years we would have gotten more sophisticated about knowing where we're at and where we're headed and why. But we still have a long, long way to go. Yes?
So how are these projected costs, how are they generated? Are they based on 2018, based on past 5 years? Yes.
What we generally do is we sit down with the client during the winter months and we take the actual last year's income statement and we say, okay, what's different from the coming year? And they may say, well, I'm going to change my rotation a little bit, which parenthetically we very seldom see rotations change a lot. Or, I'm going to away from conventional till to strip till or whatever changes, but it's taken last year as a base. And yields, what we used on that back sheet of paper, we used, I think it's at the top, 385 corn and 9-something soybeans. 924. we had to pick a number. But we haven't gone overboard in the last 5 years, even though trendline yields have been above that almost every year. We haven't gone overboard in really increasing the yields. So that's why you're seeing some negative numbers there. But excellent question. Yes, sir.
Have you done any studies or comparisons on operations using a lot of manure for fertilizer versus standard commercial fertilizer operations?
Yes. Firsthand, our family farm. We've had 13 years of corn on corn, 4,000 gallons of hog manure per year. Last 5 years, no commercial fertilizer. At one point, we were putting about 50 pounds on, half of that with the planter and half of it with the sprayer of N. And as John mentioned, we found out it was money we thought we were throwing away. And we have increased our organic matter, and I've got a picture on my computer I'll show you. It too has the same watermelon. It just hits you right in the face. Our farm is the left-hand side, the neighbor's farm is the right-hand side. Exact same soil types, and ours looks dark, a lot darker. And we've increased organic matter from 3.7 to 6.1% in 13 years.
That's water open capacity.
That's
How are you valuing that, one on the hog side and two on the crop side?
On the hog side, we're not considering any value. On the crop side, we recognize there's no fertilizer cost, other than the application cost, and it's significant. But but what it does to the soil and soil health is just phenomenal. And the micronutrients of manure is phenomenal. And I've heard several numbers, but to Howard Doster's point, the last one I remember hearing was every 1% increase in organic matter allows your soil to hold another 32,000 gallons of water per acre. So add up the difference between 3.7 and 6.1, and you can add a bunch of value to the farm. Yeah. And there was an article in the Des Moines paper just infuriated me. They said we got way too many hogs and cattle and chickens in Iowa. They produce more waste than 160 million people. And Lori Johns, thank her, she's with the Iowa Farm Bureau, she wrote an editorial to follow that. And she said, we still don't have enough hogs, cattle, and chickens to meet the nutrient needs of all the crop tillable acres we have in corn and soybeans in the state of Iowa, period. That's the facts. That's not the emotion. The emotion is we got too much hog manure. Well, baloney. We could use 2/3 more animal waste in the state of Iowa for the tillable acres we have.
Animal nutrients.
Animal nutrients,
But I
yeah.
assume that same person wants organic too, instead of farm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, running late. Any other final questions? I'll be around all evening. Thanks a lot. Your questions are just phenomenal, and I always welcome the opportunity to come back. Norm, thanks.